So I suppose I should then kick off formally and say good afternoon and welcome. On behalf of VMAGROUP and our excellent lineup of speakers this afternoon, I would like to welcome you all to our D&I Forum. I should say actually that my name's Andrew Harvey. Just in case you're wondering, I'm the CEO of VMAGROUP. I hope some of you actually may have been to one of our D&I forums previously. Hopefully you would have been, but I appreciate some of you may not have been before. For those that haven't been to any of our forums previously, and perhaps even for some of you that have, I just wanted to reconfirm some context, I guess, alongside these forums, why we're doing and what they're all about before I introduce everyone else and get stuck into a broader discussion. So for those that don't know, just very briefly, VMAGROUP is an international recruitment and executive search firm. We just happen to specialise in communications and marketing recruitment. We were formed in 1978, and we've been supporting the hiring and recruitment needs of organisations, large and small, for over 40 years, both in the UK and across Europe as well. And actually, during our long history, in a bit of context here, during our long history, we've been, I guess, intrinsically linked to the topic of diversity and inclusion, given the work that we do in helping organisations hire people and talent into their businesses and organisations. And although the subject of diversity is huge and broad, you know, we do have some very real first-hand experience of, unfortunately, the negatives and the positives that surface when you consider the broad subject of diversity and inclusion. Because I think when an organisation is hiring someone new into their team, the topic of diversity is laid bare. And I say we see the positive steps that some organisations are taking to increase diversity and inclusion in their organisations, but unfortunately, we also encounter those which are paying lip service to the topic, if I can be really direct. But actually, you know, they're paying lip service that don't actually really do much about it. And even worse, sometimes we meet those people that talk a good game, but in reality are even worse than the box tickers, because they're saying one thing and then their activity actually does something completely opposite. So I say, you know, we're right at the coalface there in seeing what happens, both good and bad. And given the role that we play in helping organisations increase their diversity and the power of our very large network, we thought it would be a really great idea at VMAGROUP to launch a series of D&I forums over a period of 12 months to help try and facilitate the conversation around diversity and inclusion in its broadest form, and to stimulate positive debate and hopefully positive change. And I should say, and what I do want to say, that one of the things we're particularly keen to do at VMAGROUP is to broaden the conversation out to ensure that as many topics as possible are discussed and covered in these forums, because we want to ensure that the subject of diversity and inclusion does not become a one or two topic conversation. Because as we all know, the challenges of diversity exist in many forms, but sometimes the focus of conversations can just beam down on one or two particular subjects. And as I say, in our D&I forums, we specifically want to cover the breadth of the subject. So, you know, talking about, yes, gender, yes, talking about ethnicity, but also talking about social mobility, ageism, diversity of thought, disability, sexual orientation, all of those different things, and give airtime to all of these really broad, so all of these topics that make up this broad debate. And I think that it's important that we do that. This is actually now our third D&I forum. The first of which, so we launched the first one in Q1 of this year, the second in Q2. The first was really quite a broad conversation around D&I, but we did pick up quite heavily on the subject of ethnicity. And in our second forum, actually, we discussed the subject of social mobility. But in this afternoon's forum, we will focus on the subject of ageism, which I have to say, I think is a topic of discussion which is not currently given enough airtime or focus within that broader D&I debate. And actually, dare I say, ageism is still a massive issue in all of its different forms. So that's, I say, why we wanted to talk about it this afternoon, open up this conversation, and hopefully have a positive conversation and see positive change going forward. It's interesting to us, and it's great to see that so many people have signed up this afternoon to listen to the discussion and hopefully take part with questions and feedback, because again, I think that's reassuring that it shows it's just as interesting as the topic to other people too. So I'm joined this afternoon, as I say, by my colleague here, Lucy Cairncross. Give us a wave, Lucy. I don't know if you can see Lucy there. Lucy's Executive Director and Executive Director of VM and responsible for recruitment operations in our in our UK business. And also we are both joined by a wonderful and fantastic panel of speakers this afternoon. So I'm going to pass over to Lucy in a second, who again will give us a bit of background and introduce our fantastic speakers. But before that, I suppose a couple of points to note. So as before, we would like to receive and discuss as many questions as we can from all of you that are listening this afternoon. So if you have a question, please do add them to the Q&A box at the bottom of the screens. You'll all, I'm sure, have used this before. You all know how it works by now. And Lucy and I will keep track of those questions as our presenters speak, and we'll save those questions until the end of the session, when hopefully we'll try and get through as many of those as possible. And I'm a stickler for time, so I'll also make sure that we finish on time. I'm sure you've all got things to do this evening, things you've got to crack on with, so we'll make sure that we finish on time as well, just so you can crack on and enjoy the rest of the evening and all of those chores that you may or may not have. So on that note, I think that is probably enough for me to set the scene. I will pass over to Lucy. Over to you, Lucy.
Thanks, Andrew. Hello, everyone. As Andrew said, my name is Lucy Cairncross and I'm Executive Director at VMAGROUP. And thank you for all joining us today. So as Andrew mentioned, we chose to focus this topic on ageism this evening for the D&I Forum. It's a subject that affects everyone in society at some point over the course of their careers. And it seems to be one of the most challenging topics, actually, really, to take priority in the diversity debate. So we were very keen to open up the forum to discuss that this evening. Our panel will share their views and experiences and the sort of positive actions that they or their organisations have been taking. So they will talk through those activities that they've been part of. And as Andrew mentioned as well, please do use the Q&A function and we will manage those questions at the end. So to get things started, I'm going to introduce Kate Clark, who's kindly taken the opening slot for us. Kate has a wealth of comms experience, having worked for over 20 years for fantastic brands within the luxury and beauty market. She's also run her own consultancy, so she's got oodles of experience in communications. She's actually joining us in her capacity as a committee member for the Women in PR organisation, a membership association for women who work within communications and PR. And so she's going to take us through some of the work that the organisation has been doing within this area, which I'm sure we'll find immensely interesting. So Kate, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. Great. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. So thank you very much for that introduction, Lucy. That's fantastic. Yes. A while ago, I started to sort of increase the number of, when I introduced myself and talked about my experience, I would say, oh, I've got 20 years experience, or I've got 21 or 22, 23. And then it got to a point where I kind of thought, actually, if I'm adding more years on, this isn't necessarily a good thing, which is a terrible shame, I think. And it's one of the things that made me realize, actually, that there comes a point where, you know, increased experience equals age, and that when it becomes about age versus just experience, it isn't always as positive as you might hope. So this is an area I feel quite passionate about myself. So I'm here with sort of two hats on. One is, as Lucy said, I am a committee member for Women in PR. I'm the membership secretary, but I've also got over 20 years experience in PR, both agency. I used to head up PR at L'Oreal in the UK. And then latterly, I was a director for 13 years at KateClarkPR. And then in the last 5 years, I set up my own agency, KCPR, KateClarkPR, where I have a model where I bring in only senior people to work with me, strategists, media relations people, and social media people. So I'm really working with an older age group of employees, and so I'm getting a lot of anecdotal feedback on what people think and what the environment's like out there. So I'll take you through, first of all, what we've been doing in Women in PR. So a little bit about Women in PR for those that don't know. The purpose of us is to champion equality and progress for senior women in PR in the UK. Our remit, our stated remit, is that we are here to increase the number and the diversity of women in leadership in PR roles and communications. And the idea is that we inspire and we support women in their industry so that they can reach their full potential, whatever that might be. We've identified that there seems to be a large number of women that manage to reach a certain level, but then there's this ceiling and it plateaus, and that a lot of women are not able to get to maintain the pace that a lot of men in our industry are able to in terms of taking those very senior slots. One of the interventions that we put in place about 7 years ago was the now quite celebrated Women in PR mentoring program. So that's a program where we match a variety of senior PR leaders, independents, agency, and in-house, and then we match them with more junior members, and so they then spend a year working together to help bring on this mentee. And we've had to increase the size every single year. We have an absolutely growing number of applications for it, and it really has got incredible traction. We run it with PR Week, and it's something that we're immensely proud of, and as I say, we're constantly being asked to increase it in size. In addition to this mentoring program, we also run a number of campaigns. And in fact, a lot of them are around the the diversity and equality agenda. And often we're looking, obviously, at gender and how that plays out within the communications and PR industry. And recently we've looked at ethnicity and where these two things intersect. But during our conversations about trying to match what we do so that we're matching the interests and the needs of our membership, we have become aware of the fact that ageism is something that actually is an issue for our industry, because we are largely, there are a majority of people within our industry are female, and they're aging as the retirement age becomes ever further away. And because of the need to continue to work, it's quite challenging for women. And anecdotally, we were becoming aware of the fact that more women were dropping out, were becoming independent. So it was important to try and understand what these reasons were, why there was this sort of dropping off at a certain age. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we're aware of the fact that there are a lot of young women who are entering the industry. And these women, we hope, will have a lifetime journey within PR. We need to understand what they thought and felt, and whether they saw a lifetime of career opportunities within our industry. And so what we have done is put together a survey. We've pulled together some research to ask people about their perceptions and their thoughts and what their intended actions are. As I said, we are largely female within the PR industry. The latest PRCA census, which was 2020, said that our industry is predominantly made up of women. We're massive 68%. So this is really important for women in PR to really understand and try and put some robust data and anecdotal experiences behind this. And interestingly, we've got a median age of about 38. So we are at that position where we've got this sort of aging workforce, and we need to understand how we can kind of retain this talent beyond this age. So the survey has been launched and is going out in field. This is only part of the work that we're doing. So the aim is to put the data and the anecdotal reports that we can get behind this, but then also launch a campaign. I can't tell you much more about it at the moment. It's activity top secret, but more will be revealed next month when we launch a program to identify and celebrate the senior stars, the older women within our industry, as part of that program. Back to our survey, we have literally just closed it. We only had it open for about a week, actually. So within, I think it was a matter of 5 days, we already had over 218 respondents, and in fact some men as well, which is very interesting. So what I've managed to do is just pull together a few highlights. These are not to go externally, please, at the moment, because obviously we're working with PR Week to launch our story. imminently. But what we have been able to show is that a third, that's over a third, 34% of the women working in PR that we spoke to have said that they have experienced some ageism within the workplace, which is really quite astounding, actually. That's a high number to feel like that. And over half, 52% of those under the age of 50, so that they don't see themselves working in the same part of the comms industries that they currently work in when they reach the age of 50. So if our mission is to support and promote senior women for the lifetime of their journey within PR, clearly some work needs to be done, because we look like we're going to lose some. A fifth, 19%, expect to leave the comms industry to work in another industry, and this rises to a quarter, so 26% of those aged 18 to 34. So again, as we look at the younger age group, this is a bit depressing, because what we need to do is to make sure that those younger women are inspired to feel that this is an industry that has their back for the duration of their career. And then among those saying that they would leave the comms industry to work in another industry, when we asked them about some of their reasons, they cited needing a better work-life balance at 46%. It'll be interesting when we drill down further into the details of that, because obviously, you know, some of the requirements for flexibility are going to be around having children. But I believe also that it's going to be about some of the requirements of an older generation to do some of the caring for the older generation as well, so older relatives. You know, we are coined the sandwich generation, that sort of middle-aged generation that's got caring responsibilities both below and above. And I think that the workplace needs to recognise that. We also discovered that there is currently a lack of older female presence within the industry, 44%. And when you think about what those younger women are feeling and reporting back to us, you know, there does need to be this sense of having a role model within a workplace, so that you can see older senior women having good careers, staying with the company that you're working for, so that you know that you've got a future there. Interestingly, now as an independent and working with freelance consultants, senior freelance consultants that I bring in to work with me, anecdotally, I've been told by some of them that some of the reasons that they left the company, the big agencies they were working for, was that a slew of redundancies of the older senior women made them suddenly look around and think, oh my God, where are all the older women? What does this mean? Does this mean that I've got no future here? But also, where's my role model? Who am I going to learn from? So I think this idea of having older role models within a workplace is really important. 42% said that there aren't enough career opportunities for older women to progress in the comms industry. And again, that kind of backs it up. And then I've included here just one anecdotal comment, which I thought was interesting to show you, which is a quote from a comms director, age 45, saying there's a huge amount of ageism in PR. She says, I dread leaving an industry I've spent over 20 years in. So again, this idea of this talent drain is a shame, and I think something that we need to address. So that's what I wanted to say to you from a sort of with my Women in PR hat on. This idea of a sort of a talent drain, anecdotally, it first came to me when I was actually discussing it with a friend, a colleague who was in PR. She had left the industry because she had decided to take a career break so that she could bring up children. I always knew she was bright, but I have to say I didn't realize she was as experienced and as such a smart cookie as I'd first thought. So she'd got a degree from Oxford, a first degree, in PPE. So clearly bright and with a vast amount of experience in both comms and PR, and also as a branding expert. And because she'd taken some years out to bring up her children, she had felt she needed to go back and retrain. So she'd done, I think, about 2 retraining courses to get back into the workplace. And I said to her, Sarah, have you actually been for some interviews? Have you actually looked at now getting a job? And she said, oh, I've just lost my confidence. I just don't know how I can do it. I've been out of the workplace for 8 or 9 years. And I thought, what a tragedy that this loss of confidence means that, you know, the workplace is going to this is a real talent drain. We're now not going to benefit from this person who's got a huge amount to offer. I think the creativity of a diverse group within a workplace is really important. We've done a lot of examination of how important it is to have a diverse brainstorm, for example, within a creative environment, so that you've got all ethnicities represented, you've got other areas of diversity, whether it's disability, so that you're really reflecting a client or a brand's needs. And I think the same thing goes for ageism as well. A lot of the brands that we're working on are going to be brands for, you know, older consumers. So having the wealth of expertise and that different lens, I think, is really important. So I think this idea of creativity is really important. Another point that I wanted to make is that during my time working with a number of clients, I've been quite inspired by some of their approaches. So I used to do a lot of work with P&G, Procter & Gamble. They were one of my clients. And they have an incredible retention figure of their employees. They join as freshers, you know, as undergrads leaving university, and stay, you know, for decades. And at the end of their career, when they retire, there is a separate company that you can join, which allows them to work as a freelance independent consultant. So they will do a few hours a week, and it's based on what you can offer. But it means that these people no longer are, you know, are no longer facing a sort of just the bleakness of retirement. But the company also benefits from all that expertise as well. And I thought how smart that was as an example of how you can retain talent and experience. One of the other points I just wanted to make was just about the pandemic. So my thoughts on that are that I know that there is a lot of reported data around the women being particularly affected during the pandemic. So women having to take the brunt of juggling and homeschooling have you know, suffered in a disproportionate way. I did some work for UCL, University College London, during the pandemic. And one of the things that I became aware of was that there was a drop in the number of senior female professors who were able to publish papers during that period, whereas during the lockdown, the pandemic, there was no drop for male professors. So even in that area, women, and at a senior older age, women were taking the brunt of the fact that they were having to multitask under this period of duress. Which I think is a shame, and I think it should be a learning and something that we can kind of look at and build on. I also did a little bit of research, and in May 2021, so earlier this year, The Guardian reported that there was an increase in the number of age discrimination claims that were taken to employment tribunals in England and Wales. Since the COVID lockdown. This was according to the Ministry of Justice data. So the claims increased by 30%. And we now look at 1 million workers over the age of 50 who are still on furlough. And this rising fear of redundancy is one that I think that we're sort of, you know, we're living with at the moment. And I think that's something that we need to all be aware of. And the final point that I just wanted to make, and it's something that I'm sure you're all aware of, is that there is an increasingly open conversation about the menopause and about the importance of employers and HR divisions and managers being aware and being sensitive and being flexible around the varying needs of women facing this particular period in their lives that will come to all women. And again, if you want to retain staff beyond this period, it seems to make sense to allow some flexibility and open up an open conversation amongst all staff so that this period in life can be navigated more easily. So those were the main areas that I wanted to talk to from a women in PR point of view, but then also with a little bit of a personal perspective. And that's why I'm so particularly pleased that Women in PR have taken on this particular area. So I will now hand back to Lucy, and I'm around obviously to answer questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was fantastic. Really good presentation, and very interesting to hear the sort of research that you guys were looking forward to hearing more about that in the next couple of weeks, by the sounds of things, the outcome of that research that, you know, Women in PR have been running. So thank you for sharing that with us. I also think it's quite interesting, actually. One of VMA Group's selling points is the age of our business and the fact that we've been going for over 40 years. And it's a big selling point for us. So it's a real shame that one of the things that you were concerned about is how long you've been working in PR and comms for, because really it should be of huge value, shouldn't it, really, to any organization. So just a reminder to all, please do post your questions in the Q&A box, and we will put that to the panel, to Kate and to the other speakers at the end. So our next speaker is Corina Iordache, who is actually joining us from the Netherlands, and hopefully the tech will all work beautifully. She is a senior brand manager for Schweppes, which is the Suntory beverage and food company, and she looks after the Western, Central and Northern Europe region. Corina is part of Suntory's D&I task force, and so she's going to talk to us a little bit and share some of her experiences and insights from that role. So Corina, I shall hand over to you.
Thank you, Lucy. Hi, everyone. I'm Corina Iordache. I'm 33 years. Probably recognize a bit my Eastern European accent because I'm Romanian. I was born in Bucharest, and I've been living in the Netherlands for the last almost 5 years now. I have 14 experience in Marcom, very much focused on digital marketing and brand management. I started working while doing my studies, and I had a full-time job whilst doing my bachelor degree. And I'm currently, as Lucy was saying, senior brand manager for Schweppes as part of Suntory Europe. Outside my professional life, I love a lot boating and being next to the water, and I live in a country full of canals. Going to the beach with the dog and have a dinner at home, and if it involves some Schweppes, that would be great. Well, today is not the perfect day, but it is definitely a very, very special day because I will share with you many personal observations. My purpose is to learn from each other, and please feel free to ask any questions or any comments in the Q&A box. I'm happy to answer and learn from you and from your questions and or comments, because I'll be sharing my learnings as a member of the Suntory Europe Diversity and Inclusion Task Force team, a bit about the tensions that me and my team identified within the younger and older groups, and some ideas about how can we help. How this task force started. Well, it's important to know that it was initiated by the top leadership coming from our CEO. We are having different business units across Europe, and each business unit is managed independently, and it has its own, let's say, company culture behind. And D&I was present in the business units with different focus, let's say. In Amsterdam more, a bit less in the other business units. So when Black Lives Matter happened during this pandemic, we all started to think about, can we do something for our employees? And we started listening more. And the more we were listening, the more things we were discovering that were not only related to racial facts or if all the minorities are being represented. More and more tensions behind diversity and inclusion came up. And then we said we need to have a team that will drive the D&I agenda at Suntory. So there were people within the company who offered themselves as volunteers to be part of this task force. And today we are a network of approximately 40 employees who outside our day-to-day job, we're also involved and allocating time to build the D&I strategy for the company. And what we've been doing for the last 12 months is to work with a consultancy company and create a safe environment for our colleagues to say their stories, say what they think, what they experience. So basically to listen. And then take the learnings that we've heard and work together with the HR, with the communication external people, and top leadership to build the strategy and contribute in tackling the issues. Well, a couple of personal observations during these 12 months. The D&I agenda started with a D&I mindset and a collective effort. Very important, a mindset, because then if we all think that we can pay attention to diversity and inclusion in everything that matters within the company, then genuinely things will happen, things will move, things will change. And it involves a collective effort, meaning that people need to be involved in the solution, not to stay outside, not to wait for things to happen. Empowerment from the top leadership is crucial. So if there's no encouragement from the top, there will be no policies, or the efforts will not be recognized or officialized, and there will not be enough resources put behind. I'm happy to be in a place where these things are happening and we get support. But again, without it, I don't think I would be here today talking about diversity and inclusion. And what I've observed working on the strategy is that diversity and inclusion strategy is here to stay, and it is an evolving process. The more things you do, the more things you discover, the more it evolves. And it's not something that you start doing overnight and in 1 year you have great results. No. I think it's the way that companies were tackling sustainability issues 10 years ago, and it's still today an issue that we need to solve. Diversity and inclusion applies the same. So it is a process that it will evolve in time, and the more issues are coming, the more we need to adapt to them. But today we are here to talk about age discrimination, and it's often under-recognized and treated much more casually than other pillars of diversity and inclusion. If we would have a list, first, what people think about when we say diversity and inclusion, people are thinking about the race and ethnicity, religion, origins, gender, sexual orientation, and then at the end comes age. It's not on purpose. It's just that we treat it, it's less polarizing than the other topics, and we tend to treat it very superficially. There is a non-intentional lack of awareness, how I put it here. We don't, simply because we don't think and we don't talk about it, this doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And we can bring awareness around it if we can understand how age discrimination is manifested. What I discovered is that both younger and older employees experience age discrimination. Not only it happened to them in this organization, it happens. And even before joining a new organization, starting with recruitment processes. So I've heard many stories that I will share with you from different friends, from different colleagues. But both younger ones, between 24 and up until 24, 25 years, they encountered age discrimination. And also employees who are 40, 45 plus, they are already experiencing it. I don't know if you recognize any of the following. The fear that your age will be perceived negatively by colleagues or recruiters. When I was looking to change a job, when I was telling to them that, yes, I have already experienced because I was working while I was doing my studies, and I already had quite a lot of experience, many recruiters did not believe me because I was 23. People at 23, they are just finishing their bachelor degree, and I already had 4 years experience in the industry. So I had to take out some years from my CV. But that's also happening when you're trying to apply for a management position because of being too young or being too old. I have colleagues who are almost 60 years, and they don't even think about applying for a management position because they say that there was a time for that and now no longer it is, because new people are coming and new people should be in the management positions because they are irrelevant. It's very painful to hear that you think that you're irrelevant because you're being too old. The third point comes to what Kate was saying before, taking some years of experience from the resume to make a better impression. It happened to me when I was too young, but it happens to other people when they already have a lot of experience, because they think that the recruiters will perceive that they have very high expectations when it comes to the salary, or they have difficulties to adapt because they are very, very experienced. So it comes with a lot of prejudice. The frustration that you're not taken seriously by some colleagues. It happens to both groups. The younger ones tend to say that they are not taken seriously because they are inexperienced. They are too young to know. They are too young to have an opinion. And the older ones say that they don't feel that they are anchored into the modern times or what's happening in the world. They lived in a different era. So this is how they feel. And the last point, not feeling part of the team because you feel a minority. You don't have the sense of belonging because most of the employees are aged between 25, 30, up until 40, 45. So both the younger groups and the older ones are a minority. And this means that they don't feel represented within the company, within their teams. They feel that they are a bit like misfits. Well, when we did the strategy, and I was saying it's a very long-term one, and it's still work in progress, it will be revealed in the next couple of weeks. But I can share with you some solutions that we are already taking it and are easy to implement, and I recommend to everyone. Just think about them, see what you can do. The big discovery is that both older and younger employees want to be involved in the solution, together with the rest of their colleagues who are driving the D&I agenda. So they want to be involved. They want to do things better for the next generations that will come. Some easy steps to take that we are taking it already. First one, talk about the age. It's not a taboo. Don't hide it. That's why it doesn't have awareness. That's why it's at the end of the list of the D&I pillars, because we don't talk about it, because it's, again, very casually treated. Emphasize on the importance of the age. What can we learn from each other? Providing hints and tips on how to use age in your benefit. What did you learn about your experience? Make everyone feel represented. If we remember in the previous slide, I was saying that they feel that they're a minority. Let's see how we can look at the recruitment process. Who are the people talking with them? How are we treating them? How are we communicating to them in the day-to-day life? The pictures that we're showing, the corporate pictures, everything matters. Every visual identity is saying something about how different age groups are represented within the company. But even in the brand communication, I had colleagues saying that they don't see commercials with older people unless the commercials are for products for older people. And yes, this is something that we didn't realize if we would have not listened to them. And the third step is creating mentorship programs between different age groups. there's always something to learn from each other. And both older and younger people can find value from this kind of relationship if the older ones are mentoring the younger ones and vice versa. And when I heard that comment from colleagues saying that they don't feel represented in the brand communication, we went back to the marketing teams and we shared with them the entire report and the issues that we're facing. And then we started being more aware, more conscious about these issues. And what I will share with you today is the latest communication, latest advertising from Schweppes that is running across Europe, except UK, because in UK, Schweppes is owned by Coca-Cola. So you'll see the commercial that is running across Europe, where we had in our mind to implement diversity and inclusion. Let me share my screen again.
I like it like that.
Like it like that. I like it like that. Schweppes.
One second, I'll go back to my presentation. But I hope you liked it. It's I don't know if you consciously you've seen, if you were aware how, if you've noticed the diversity that it is in that commercial. It was really not part of the brief, but it came out very naturally after being part of this task force, and we really wanted to feel everyone that it is represented in this commercial. Last but not least, some key takeouts from my side that I always have them in mind about when it comes to age discrimination. If you don't hear it, it doesn't mean that it's not in there. If people are not saying about it, this doesn't mean that they're not feeling it. So I advise to create a safe environment where people can share if they experienced age discrimination or not. You might be surprised that they haven't, and that's good, but it's good to understand what is the current situation. And often try to involve a third party to drive the conversation, so a consultancy agency or that can make people speak about age discrimination without thinking that, I don't know, the company it will affect their relationship with the company, let's say. Try to put yourself in their place. I'm 33, and yeah, for me I experienced age discrimination, let's say, when I was young, but I never thought about the older ones, about how they feel age discrimination. And now I'm aware because I spoke with my colleagues, but also with my parents. And we've all discussed with my colleagues. We never talk about our parents. How was it for them? How it is for them? Well, they're still working. Did they experience age discrimination? Well, I will let you find out. It's very personal, but within my group, we all shared different stories about how our parents experience age discrimination, and they never talked about it. So empathy is very, very important to be part of the D&I strategy. Third point, involve the people who genuinely want to be part of the solution. They are eager to be part of it. And for example, in our case, if it wasn't this initiative, I would never figure out that there are 40 people out there who, just like myself, they are eager to do something. They want to be involved. They want to collaborate together. And now we are today after 1 year, and we see how much we did. And we are very proud of it, and we can't wait to implement the strategy. Why is it so important to be involved? We always thought about maybe the leadership team would work, or the HR departments would do at some point the D&I agenda, and it will come from top to bottom. But actually, it came up into our minds a proverb, a Chinese proverb. If we tell to people, again, if it comes from top to bottom, like a new policy, here it is, have it, please implement it, people will tend to forget. If they are involved, they will understand, and then they will go back to their day-to-day life, day-to-day interactions with people, work, and they will integrate diversity and inclusion. And when it comes to ages, in the eyes of the others, we've all been either too young for something, and maybe someday we will be too old for something in the eyes of the others again. So I always think about what can we change today that will have a positive impact in our future when it comes to age discrimination. And now we'll leave it open, because again, I think we should all be involved and come up with answers and work together on driving D&I within our organizations, and give to the age discrimination the importance that it deserves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corina. That was really, really good. And I enjoyed the video as well. It was great. It's really good to see what your organisation is doing. And actually the fact, it sounds like it's come quite naturally as well. It's been quite a natural process, an evolving process. And I wrote down that, you'd said about the fact that it's about listening and learning and working together, and that evolving process, and it's sort of a constant, isn't it, which is really great to see that that's happening in your organisation, and well done you for getting so involved and being so clearly passionate about it. So thank you. The other thing I was noticing is that Channel 4 are doing some very positive things around advertising, and Campaign are doing some advertising work around trying to improve age diversity within advertising campaigns, which links in really well with what you're doing there as well. So thank you. So this brings me on to our final speaker, who's Kim Chaplin, who joins us from the Centre for Better Ageing, an organisation whose purpose it is to support policy and practices to improve society and lives for those in their later life. And that will actually be 1 in 4 of us over the age of 65 by 2040. I think, Kim, and I'm going to be one of those, definitely. So yeah, that was a good statistic that I saw on your website. Kim's got over 30 years of experience in the employment and skills sector, and she's got extensive experience working in partnership to support employment services in the public and third sector as well. So thank you so much, Kim, for joining us, and I will hand the floor to you.
Okay then, so my name is Kim Chaplin. I work for the Centre for Ageing Better. And the Centre for Ageing Better is funded with a lottery endowment, and our focus is actually on outcomes to make later life improved. And we have a number of interventions, one of which is around the whole work agenda. And our ambition is to see more workers aged between 50 and 70 in the workplace, which is really interesting, that although our life expectancy has increased hugely in the last 100 years, our working life has not. And that's a problem. That's an issue for us as individuals, And it's an issue for society as a whole. And there are some endemic system challenges we need to address. And there are also some processy things to address as well. So if we go to the next slide, I think we need to work through the next. And why this matters? Well, the next slide, I think, will tell us why it matters to the economy. So it matters to the economy because at the minute, 1 in 3 workers are aged 50 plus. And by 2050, actually 4 out of 10 workers will be over 50. So we're not getting the supply of younger people entering the labour market, and that isn't going to change. So we're really configured, and we tend to focus our whole education system and our labour market interventions on moving young people into the labour market and investing in those young people for the future. And what we will see is that actually, what we're seeing now actually is that the labour market can't sustain that model, and that what we need to do is think about the middle range people, if you like. So when you're 50, actually, you've probably got a lot, 20 years later life, working life to go. That's another career. I think we've mentioned this beforehand, but we don't think about working life like that at the minute. We think about it incrementally. And actually at the minute, what we're also seeing is that because we think about it incrementally, under half of men, less than a third of women are still in employment by the time they're 65, they're exiting quite quickly. What's interesting though is actually we also see a lot more returners coming back. So people exit for a short while, maybe it's up to 4 years, and then probably 20% of those that have exited come back again. So it's a balancing thing that goes on in their 60s, which we think is change in the labour market. But we need to think about this differently if our economy is going to survive. And we're definitely seeing that sort of thing happening around the heavy goods market. And drivers at the moment, the skill shortages are making us think about older workers and engaging people back into sectors and where there are skill shortages that might have left. Next slide, please. It matters to employers, though, not just because of that economic piece with the economy as a whole, but in terms of diversity as well. We know there was a study published on the 16th of December last year, 2020, by OECD, and that provides called Promoting Age Inclusivity. And what that does is it provides empirical evidence that a multi-generational workforce is likely to be 1% more efficient and productive on the bottom line. We know that older workers transfer skills to younger workers. And if we think about when we were young workers, some of the things that were really impressive to us in the world of work were actually role models. And the things that stay with you are people more than actually process or job content in many ways. And when you measure productivity, what we tend to do is measure productivity on the basis of the individual. But when you see a multi-generational workforce, what's really interesting is you don't actually see that much more productivity in the multi-generational workforce from the older workers. But what you do see is increased productivity from younger workers. So a younger worker that's working side by side in a mixed environment works better and more effectively, and therefore the team as a whole works better. It's really interesting, the area of mixed skills and the better matching profile. The other thing to say is an ageing population means that actually the money and the wealth of the population is in that older age group. So in terms of having representation of that group in your workforce, that's really, really, really important. The converse of this, though, is we've just conducted a survey with YouGov over this summer, and we've talked to 3,000 employers across sector and across size. Most organisations, although they think they're unprepared for an ageing workforce, feel that they're doing okay when it comes to the D&I standards. So they will say that in their sector there is an ageism problem. They're twice as likely to say in the sector there's a problem in their sector, but when they talk about their own organisation, they think they're doing okay. And as a consequence, most organisations at the moment have no plans to do anything specific on age in the next 2 years, which troubles us, to be honest, because I think employers need to do something about D&I, and we've talked about that a lot, but actually employers need to do something about how they look at age and how they respond to an ageing workforce for themselves and for the economy as well. So let's get to the next slide. So what I'm going to talk about now is 2 areas for action for employers, which we think are, we have identified 5 criteria that need attention, but there are 2, I think, that are the big hits. So if we go to the next slide, what I've done is listed the 5 things. So when we talk to older workers about what they value in an age-friendly employment space, these 5 areas are the areas where the things they look for to be able to determine that where they work is age friendly. And when I talk about age, what's really interesting is, we've talked about it here, we talk about age across the age band, and we've already talked about it in earlier speakers have mentioned that actually a young person is as likely to feel discrimination as an older worker, and in fact, slightly more so, oddly, or they're more likely to complain about it, a young person, than an older person. Now, the first thing, the biggest thing that employers can do to be more age friendly, to think about the working environment they provide, is to address flexibility. Now, flexibility is really interesting because what COVID has done and the whole working from home thing is challenged a whole lot of myths. So it's made us more confident and more trustworthy about people working remotely. It's also made people feel quite comfortable that they're actually addressing flexibility when in fact they're not. So a lot of people transpose working remotely for being flexible. When we're talking about flexibility, we're talking about hours, we're talking about the ability to change terms in short minute moments, to work from home, to work in the office. There's a whole range of things that we want to think about in flexibility. We know that government, well, if you don't know, government actually went out to consult on day 1 entitlement to flexibility this week. So there's a consultation exercise on the back of what we've learned from COVID going on about people being legally entitled to have flexible work from the day they start a job. The interesting thing is that actually government has decided not to make that a law or an obligation, but to make it, if you like, best practice, a good practice to do. The thing that when we look at the evidence around flexibility is just having an entitlement isn't good enough. What really attracts people to an organisation is that they advertise a job in a different way, and they advertise that they are open to flexibility, and they open up that conversation with the person, the candidate, that flexibility is an option within that job. And the stats at the minute in the labour market at the minute say that if you as an employer offer flexibility, the number of applicants you'll get for your job is up by 30%. And we know in skill shortage areas, I was talking to somebody that was advertising contact centre vacancies the other day, where they were getting 20 applications for those entry-level jobs, they're getting 1. So in those type of skill shortage areas, flexibility is as important as remuneration. And it's really important when it comes to age and diversity. So that's the first area. If we go to the next slide, this is a very quick summary of a toolkit that we've got. So if you go to our Aging Better website, you will find a toolkit on flexibility, and you'll also find a toolkit on recruitment, which I'm going to come on to. And our toolkits offer guidelines into the scope of flexibility, how you can enact it in your organisation, how you can think about it differently. But what we also do is offer a scoring system for the characteristics of your organisation. So you can actually think about these criteria and apply them to what you do, and test whether indeed you are a flexible organisation or you just think you are. And I mean that in the best spirit. I think it's very easy to convince yourself that you offer flexibility. We in our organisation at Aging Better offer quite a lot of flexibility. The thing that challenges us quite often is mapping back those flexible arrangements, which are often customised arrangements to the individual with an organisation that works. It's really challenging to bring those 2 things together. And I was in an international conversation last week with organisations tackling ageism, and Stanford University was talking about flexibility in a really interesting way, because people go and work there because of the reputation of the organisation, but even they are finding that they are struggling to recruit in high skill areas, and flexibility means different things to different business units on their campus, to the point that some business units are offering customisation. So you can basically go into that organisation and state what you want your job to look like, how the terms of that shall respond, and how you can tailor what they want doing in terms of productivity to your home circumstances, your caring responsibilities, your health needs. Obviously, I think I'm talking at the very high end of the labour market, but I think this is going to trickle down. So we've got that piece there that I think is really important to age. And when you're competing in a tight labour market with skill shortages, flexibility is going to be another part of the offer that you're going to have to consider when you put vacancies out there. The next one I'm going to go on to the next slide is recruitment and hiring age positively. We have a programme which is called Good Recruitment for Elder Workers. When we started working on that, what we found actually when we looked at age positivity was that it's as important to look at the whole age as it is. Don't just target older workers. You need, when you go out in recruitment, to just be age positive. Everything you do needs to be of benefit to all ages. So it comes back to the D&I conversation that we've just had. It's very important to think about this differently. And if we go on to the next slide, again, we have a toolkit on this. We're going to launch a program of this week. What we know is recruitment in particular isn't working for older applicants. So rather than target older applicants, you must recruit age positively. Putting yourself in the shoes of elder workers, I looked at some of the questions actually in the Q&A. It is absolutely clear that it is more risky to transition in the labour market the older you get. So when you look at people in the early age, what you see is people moving about the labour market really freely and really happily, and not having a concept of risk. When you look at behaviours of people as they move on, they tend to stay in jobs for longer, and they worry more about applying for different jobs because they perceive prejudice. And some of that prejudice is there and some of it isn't there. But one of our ambitions in our organisation is to de-risk the labour market, because we need to. If we go back to the economic argument for why we need to change, and the employer argument for why we need to change, then one of the things that we all need to lean into really is changing the labour market so there's not the element of risk of job moves for older workers that is perceived or is there. Because we all need to see more older workers moving around the labour market at the same sort of level as younger workers do. And at the moment, that just does not happen. We do know that nearly a third of those people in the age group that we target have been told at some point that they're unlikely to be successful because of having too much experience. Now, too much experience translates to there is prejudice against your age. We're very keen that people take off age in SIFT. We know that some algorithms actually are prejudice, and we are talking to recruitment organisations about the algorithms that they use, because there is some systemic prejudice in that whole piece, and we just need to unpick those processes and refix them so that what we see is a more even playing field. Can we go on to the next slide? So here we go. There isn't what we have learned, and we've tested these programs, and we're doing a bit more work now with different employers, and I'm going to come on to that because we're looking for volunteers, is that just changing words in an advert isn't a silver bullet. There isn't a silver bullet on recruitment. You've just got to really pay attention to this piece. Words and phrases do make a difference to older workers. What people tend to do when they advertise jobs is actually market their company, and in marketing their company, they use words that actually are off-putting for older workers. But actually, if you can get these words right, everybody is satisfied with the result, younger workers and older workers. So we know that language that appeals to elder candidates does not deter younger applicants. And what you want is choice right the way through this process. I'm not going to go into this in detail in this presentation because the evening's getting on, but you can find the detail of this in our website. And as I say, we're launching a toolkit on this at the end of next week, on Thursday, in fact. So we would be really interested if we go to the next slide. Next one, please. In anybody that would be interested in either of these two areas and would like to work with us in testing out some of these things. So we work with employers to develop our evidence. We work with the labour market, we work with central government to develop our evidence. But you can never have enough. So we now have these products and these toolkits, and we would be really interested in working with you. If you want to improve your diversity, your results and flexibility, so your retention, because actually flexibility is about retention. If you want to have a go at any of the three I haven't mentioned, please do get in touch. And if you want to look at your recruitment practices, again, please do get in touch with us. We are funded by a lottery, so there is no finance involved in it. We're just really interested in engaging partners in testing this area. And I'll finish there.
That's brilliant, Kim. Thank you. And thank you, Trish, behind the scenes for helping out with the presentation as well. But yeah, that's great, Kim. And actually, we would happily share that across our network as well with regards to that call out for anybody wanting to get involved with you guys with regards to that research as well. So we'll definitely do that. But thank you so much for sharing that presentation. And I do think it's really interesting. The pandemic's been picked up on a couple of times now, but that change in flexible working and flexibility around work, we're obviously in a bit of a transition phase now as well, aren't we? I think I'm certainly noticing more people returning to office work, but at the same time, that flexible, our hybrid model is still absolutely in demand. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how that continues to affect the support of diversity, better diversity in working environments for the future. So that's great, thank you. I think we've got lots of questions. So Andrew, I don't know if you spotted any immediately that you wanted to pick up on first.
Well, good question. I mean, we've got some brilliant questions here. I wonder whether we sort of start from the top. So I don't think there's any questions here that aren't worth calling out really, but as I say, we're just sort of mindful of time. So there's a question here around for the panel. So do presenters think that the growth in identity politics is causing a problem in our industry? As an example, so the term pale, male and stale is still a phrase that one might hear, but perhaps more accepted than other phrases that you could expect might be talked about. Do we think that there is is there a challenge there, a widely accepted challenge that some of this stuff is still acceptable and some of it isn't? And perhaps there's another question here, actually, another phrase, which is a really good one that we hear a lot as a recruitment company when hiring, is to say we want a digital native, someone that's into digital, into social, live and breathe. And you probably chat to those people, a young kind of person who lives that digital kind of thing. So the idea that a digital native can't possibly be someone that's over 30, for example, but that seems to be a socially acceptable phrase to use. Certainly I hear that all the time, but there are many other phrases when it comes to D&I clearly that I would never hear. What do panelists think about that? Kim, I'll come to you first because you're off mute. So why don't you come to you first? What are your thoughts on this?
I know digital natives that are in their 50s and 60s. I think it's, when I first saw the question, the pale, male and stale, it's hard not to be cynical about that particular statement. It's still the case, isn't it? In FTSE 200s and 100s, there are more people called John than there are women at the top of the organisation. So there's almost I think we should be very careful with our language, as the Labour Party have just found out, calling somebody a difficult name. It's just not acceptable to be that politically incorrect anymore. So you need to be modern and you need to be fair and you need to be open. But often these things are thrown back at you as a challenge to all of that. It's difficult. It's difficult. I think I wouldn't use the term digital native either. I think you have to be really upfront about how you describe jobs and how you describe the profile that you're looking for. And you need to be not sloppy about that. And if you're going to apply at D&I and be open on recruitment and get the best possible net spread of candidates that you want for the job, you just have to be careful and you have to use open and unpolitical language. And sorry, politically correct language.
Thanks, Kim. Kate, what are your thoughts on this?
I really am not sure that that it's as overt as that. I think it's one of those things that is subtle and unsaid. The ageism is probably not verbalized. It's a sort of an unconscious bias, and that makes it actually much more difficult to identify and tackle. But I would say that, there are some positive spins that you can put on selling age and experience, so that you can reassure. Certainly the way that I, as an independent agency right now, am positioning what I can offer clients is senior people who are experienced in the whole of comms, so get the industry, but are also, newly digitally trained. So I'm taking a lot of people from a group called Digital Mums. So they're all people ex-advertising agency, ex-social media, ex-digital, ex-PR, so have been in this sort of the marketing mix, but have now trained specifically in social media. So what a client gets is somebody who's senior, who gets the full picture, but is also completely up to speed in the absolute latest, because the training is absolutely excellent from this group. So no, I don't think it's something that I've come up against because it's not being voiced. I think it's probably just in the way that decisions are made by employers, and it's down to the salary that an older person might be perceived to want to ask for, which might be part of the decision making.
Thanks, Kate. It's interesting. Corina, I'll just come to you as well, just to get your thoughts on this. Do you see these phrases? Do you still hear these phrases in your workplace at all? Are they more acceptable than others?
Well, as I was saying before, I have experience in digital marketing, and I think I applied to jobs where they were saying digital native is required, and I found myself in that description. But then after that, with the years, I understood that it is indeed a term that reflects more the younger generation. And I think there are two. Discrimination happens in the age or in the other matters happens when either people are not conscious that they're discriminating, they don't want to do it. Their intention is not to be discriminative. And in some other situations it is. For me, I think is the responsibility of the company, of the recruitant, to educate people to understand that words are very, very powerful. And in this case, digital native, what do people understand by digital native? And in the collective consciousness and general understanding, digital native is referring to someone who is young, who grew up in the digital age. So automatically, I think the older people are excluded from that. And this is something that honestly, I dislike. And I think that some wordings are not unconsciously put there in the announcements. I think they are just subliminally somehow suggesting that they are targeting younger people.
Thanks, Corina. That's some interesting questions there and thoughts on that. Actually, Lucy, I'm going to come to you with a question, actually. So I would say there's a recruitment question here, which is definitely your field of expertise. Someone's mentioned here that on their CV, they mentioned that they've got over 25 years of experience. That's part of their elevator pitch on their CV. Is that something you think that person should leave out? Is that going to be a challenge for them, or should they just be honest and upfront about the level of experience they've got and be proud of the level of experience they've got?
So I'm definitely in the honest and upfront camp. And I think it's a great thing to have that level of experience and brings huge amounts of value to any organization. And I think if you're right for that role, if you've got the right experience and skills, then I just don't see why you shouldn't have that kind of information on there. So it was interesting. I think it was Corina who mentioned about the taking out some years of experience out of your CV. That for me I'd always be a bit like, oh, no, don't do that. You've got to have everything on there and make sure that you're being really honest and upfront about what you've done. And I think I prefer that. And I've always been of the mindset that if someone has an issue with that, then that's not the right organization or the right person for you to be working with in the first place. So that's always been my view. And I would always encourage people to be, to embrace the fact that they've got that level of experience. I certainly do with my own recruitment experience and how long I've been recruiting for, etc. So yeah, I would encourage people to say that.
Just come in on that, because I agree with you. It's Kim. I agree with you to a point. So I think the thing is that you put down, when you apply for a job, you need to read the spec of the job really, really well. And then you write your application to meet that spec. And there's times when, don't apply for it, don't write it down if it doesn't meet the spec. What I find with elder workers in particular, especially when they've been made redundant, is that there's a sense of panic. So to start off with, when people leave a job, if you've left a job voluntarily and moving to something else, it's not an issue. You apply it at your own pace and you think about it. Where it starts to fail and people there's a breakdown, is when people are made redundant or didn't intend to leave the labour market and they're trying to get back in. And then what they do is what I call spray and pray. And they write a generic application and they throw it at jobs that they wouldn't have necessarily looked at if they were in a different position. And then it becomes an issue but not just because of the amount of time, because it's actually a badly written generic application. So I just would think very carefully about using. I agree with you. I don't like gaps on CVs. I like to see the whole thing. I'm in my 60s. I've got 40 years experience and I'm proud of it. And it absolutely fits the job I'm doing now. And I mentioned it on the application I made for this job. So there's a time when it's really absolutely bang on right. You've just got to use a bit of nous really in that whole thing, but there is the big thing that I hear all the time is people in their 40s and 50s that have written hundreds of applications, and if they have got a response back, they've probably got a response back on 10 of them, and they feel that it's the amount of time what they've put on the application is the thing that's at fault, and often they blame them. Well, I've put too much on my CV, I've put too much length of time on my CV, and it's possibly not the right thing. It's probably not the wrong thing that happened.
Thanks, Tim. I think you raised some very good points there as well, some really great points. I'm going to move on because I'm just mindful of the time and the questions that we've got, and I might not put these questions to everyone on the panel. But I think, Kate, I'm going to come to you on the next question. So there's a question here about, has the pandemic minimised the ageism issue? Because, and I think this is a really interesting point, because when you're working over video and you're joining a new organisation, for example, you're not up close and personal. You're not thinking about going down the pub with that person. You're not worried about whether you're going to chat with them over lunch. It's just this person on the other end of the video, and there's a distance between those people. Whereas this person has pointed out that perhaps if you're in an office environment, you're meeting someone you think you might sit next to, or you might chat to all day long, or you might get down to the pub with after work or go out for lunch. Actually, there's a bigger consideration about, do you get on with that person? Have you got anything in common? Are we on the same page? And there is a point there that maybe the online working has minimised the ageism issue. What are your thoughts on that, Kate?
Well, I mean, I've not heard of that. It kind of makes sense that, yes, you've got this sort of virtual barrier where they're not seeing the whole you, and you're not required to sort of play with everybody after work in the way that you might be, and you might feel uncomfortable with. So there might be some perceptions about that. But I think that it is a fact that, you are probably more vulnerable to redundancy if you are expensive and senior and businesses are suffering, which they are. And so I think that, there are a number of redundancies that are happening. I can see it happening around me of this older age group, and they're the ones that are going to struggle to get back into work, because, the pyramid, the triangle of employment means that people, companies are going to be recruiting from within. It's cheaper to promote younger people. So I would like to think that was one of the benefits, although I've not seen it, the one of not having to worry about coming across as old because you're not actually in the office.
Thank you for that. Corina, I'm going to come to you, and I'll come to Kim with this question as well. It's an interesting question here, but you might have touched on this just to be confirmed. Do you think, in your experience, Corina, in terms of what you've been doing at your organisation, do you think ageism, a generalisation here, do you think ageism is the worst challenge for men or women, or is it similar for both?
I haven't seen any differences, or in more men or more women. So it's in both.
Okay.
What I've seen is that in leadership positions, there are more men, older men, but that comes Yeah, it's very tricky. I've never thought about it. So in the leadership positions, there comes the battle between men and women, how much women are represented in the leadership positions. But now if I look at the age, there are men who are older in the leadership position, but there are no older women in leadership positions. So clearly for them, the development journey stopped at some point after 45 years.
Okay, thank you. And Kim, I'm going to come to you, but just build on that question. So again, based in terms of the work you do you think it's a bigger challenge, ageism, for men or women? And the follow-on question is, because you might have more experience with this, is that do you think ageism is a bigger factor in certain industries over other industries?
Yeah, so actually the evidence says that women experience more ageism than men. So the perception is that when you ask somebody what old is later for men than it is for women. And that perception of age is quite interesting. And the other evidence is that women do less well as they get older as well, partly because they carry the caring burden. And they're less likely to have safer pensions. So in a work environment, women do fare less well. And definitely, I was going to go on to say also the gender change depends on what sectors you're in as well. So in more physical sectors, there is more prejudice. And often it's not the case. You can go into construction and quite often see people in their 70s and 80s even working on construction sites. But there are perceptions around that, and given that women are not in construction to any degree anyway, that they don't do so well. So yeah, sectors, particularly sectors where there's a physical requirement to the job, ageism is stronger, and gender-wise, women fare less well than men.
Thank you for that. Kate, I can see you've got your hand up. What are your...
I do, during my bit of research before coming on to be a panelist here, I had a little read around, and Kim, you might be aware of this, this data. The Longevity Forum in 2018 reported in the FT that ageism at work begins at the age of 40 for women, but 45 for men. So it is for both, but men have got a 5-year protection barrier.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, brilliant. Right, I think we've probably got time for one more question, really, which I think is quite an interesting question. I think it underlines a lot of what we're talking about. And I suppose the question is, in summary, is when it comes to people getting new jobs, I suppose, or developing their career, is the issue the recruitment process that people follow? Is it the mechanics of that recruitment process, what they ask people to do, how they go about it? Or actually, is it not about the process? It's about the narrow-mindedness of the people that are at the end of the process and ultimately making the decision. Right, Kim, you've got your hand straight up there.
Yeah, what we found is really, really clear evidence that even organisations where they have really great policy statements and all the processes in place, when you start to interrogate those processes, it's the culture that makes the difference, and it's the people. And I've been in 3 roundtables on different topics this year alone, and on different studies, and that has been borne out right the way through. So what it's about is culture and leadership, and the people that make those decisions. So you can have the best policies in your organisation around recruitment and the best recruitment processes. If the person that's making the decision hasn't had the education and training to do it right, it will fail.
I think that's a very good point. Well, I'll just come to Kate and Corina on this. What are your thoughts, Kate? Part of the recruitment process broken, or is it the people and culture?
I think a lot of it is probably to do with the individual that's doing the interviewing and their age as well. So, you know, I have myself been in a position where I've been applying for a role that would be more junior than the person who is interviewing me, and they are older, they are younger than I am, and there is a discomfort in the room. I think people are uneasy with that. So anecdotally, I think that might be one of the issues, but again, it supports what Kim was saying, really, that it's down to individuals, and you know, maybe it's unconscious bias, and so the more it's talked about and the more it becomes part of this D&I training, then we can hopefully educate people who are in those management roles so that they are not, subject to these unconscious biases.
Brilliant, thank you, agreed. Corina, just 30 seconds from you on this. What are your thoughts?
Totally agree with Kate. Absolutely, 100%. There are different components. We cannot say, look only particularly at recruitment or particularly in people and culture. We need to see the big picture and see who needs to be trained, who are the people driving the agenda, who can influence from the recruitment up until the company culture.
Brilliant, thank you for that. And I think there's agreement there across the panel. I'm sure if Lucy were to speak, I'm sure she'd say the same. I'm putting words in her mouth, but I'm sat here, I've got two clocks in front of me. One says 6:27, the other says 6:30. If we take a midway point, we're getting close to the end, that's for sure. So I think this is perhaps a good time to draw things to a close and me to just, so I suppose, summarize there at the end. Firstly, a massive, massive, massive thank you to our brilliant speakers this afternoon, to Kim, to Kate and Corina. It's been absolutely brilliant to have you on. I think you've shared a lot of great thoughts and insight and some presentations as well. And, you know, I can see how many people have joined and I can see how many people have dropped off. And we probably had 1 or 2 people drop off, and that's probably because their internet stopped working, I'm sure. So, you know, we have held the gaze, or you have held the gaze of people for an hour and a half, and I'm sure that is due to the quality of the thoughts that you've shared with us this afternoon. So thanks so much for that. Thanks to Lucy as well, also for sharing some thoughts, and thanks to Trish behind the scenes, who's helped make everything work and run. But also a massive thank you to everyone that's come along and joined this afternoon. I think we've achieved what we set out to do. As I said at the start, one of the reasons we launched these D&I forums was to be able to talk about diversity and inclusion in its broadest form, and pick up on all of these subjects, many of which are not given the airtime that they absolutely deserve. And I think we've done that this afternoon in giving some airtime to this topic of ageism. I think the next step is to make sure we all go away and talk about it even more and more. And you know, and it's you know, it's like a domino effect. The more we talk about it, the more we share these sorts of people in our organisations and with colleagues, the more those dominoes fall over, and we start to talk about it more broadly in our organisations. So hopefully, we'll see it as high on the agenda as we do other topics of this nature. So thank you all for coming. We will be running another D&I forum in the autumn, date TBC, I think probably the first week of December. Lucy's nodding, date to be confirmed. Please do look out for it. Please do come along. If you've got any thoughts or ideas, if you're listening out there, you'd like to be a speaker, you've got stuff to share, then please do drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, thank you for joining. Have a lovely evening, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon. Thanks very much.